Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. While I was lying in a hospital bed, my son sold Pops' diner behind my back. He changed the locks, smiled for the family, and called it doing what was best. But he forgot one thing. The old receipt printer still remembered every lie. The first sign that my life had been sold without me was not the for sale sign. It was the sound of my own key refusing to turn in the back door of Pop's diner. I stood in the alley behind the restaurant with my hospital bracelet still folded in my coat pocket. My left side ached where the nurses had taped monitors to me for 4 days. The November air smelled of grease, rain, and the old brick wall that had trapped 40 years of breakfast steam. I had walked that alley every morning since I was 14. I knew every crack in the pavement, every rust stain beneath the vent, every loose hinge on the trash gate. But the lock was new. I tried the key again because grief makes fools of old men. Metal scraped. Nothing moved. Inside, I could hear voices, not the morning crew. Not the dishwasher humming. Not the soft bell that rang when regulars came in for coffee before sunrise. These were sharper voices, impatient voices, the kind that carried clipboards and believed history was clutter. Then my son, Caleb, opened the door 3 inches. He did not look surprised to see me. That was the part that told me everything. A surprised man says, "Dad, what are you doing here?" A guilty man sighs like your presence is an inconvenience. "You should be resting," he said. I looked past his shoulder. The old pie case was empty. The photographs of my wife and me on opening day had been taken off the wall. 2 men in black polo shirts were measuring the counter with laser tools. One of them had set his coffee on the stool where Pops used to sit every morning and read the paper. "What did you do?" I asked. Caleb rubbed the bridge of his nose, performing exhaustion. "We talked about this. We never talked about changing locks. You were in the hospital. I was not dead." His eyes hardened for half a second before he softened them again. That was his talent. He could put a silk cover over a knife before anyone else saw the blade. Behind him, my daughter-in-law Marissa stepped into view. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect sympathy arranged on her face like makeup. She carried a folder against her chest and smiled at me the way people smile at someone unstable in public. "Eli," she said softly, using my name instead of Dad, because she had never once made room for me in her family vocabulary. "This is a lot. Maybe we should speak somewhere private." I looked at the folder. The label read transfer agreement. My chest tightened harder than it had in the hospital. Pop's diner was not a business to me. It was my father's hands in the woodwork, my wife's handwriting on the first menu, my son's height marks penciled inside the pantry door. It was the last place that still carried everyone we had buried. Caleb stepped out into the alley and closed the door behind him, shutting me out of my own life. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice, "you had a cardiac event. The doctor said stress could kill you. I made a hard decision. You sold it. I protected it." That was the first lie, not the biggest, not even close. But it was the first one he said to my face while the new lock gleamed between us like a silver verdict. I should have shouted. I should have shoved past him. I should have called the police right there in the rain. Instead, I heard Pop's voice in my head, low and steady from years behind the grill. "Never swing when a man wants you angry. Make him think you are beaten, then count what he forgot." So I put my key back in my pocket. Caleb mistook my silence for weakness. Marissa mistook my shaking hands for surrender. Neither of them remembered the old receipt printer under the counter. Neither of them knew it was still plugged into the office line. And neither of them knew Pops never trusted a cash drawer that could not tell a story. Marissa drove me home in her white SUV because Caleb said I looked pale. He said it loudly enough for the men inside the diner to hear. That was important to him. Caleb never wasted an audience. I sat in the passenger seat with rain sliding down the window and watched my town move past me like I had already become a ghost. The hardware store where Pops bought the first hinges. The church where my wife Helen sang off-key every Christmas Eve. The pharmacy where the clerk still kept my blood pressure pills behind the counter because I forgot the refill dates. Every place still stood. Only my place had been taken. Marissa kept both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Her diamond ring flashed whenever we passed a streetlight. "You scared us," she said. "No, I inconvenienced you." Her smile tightened. "That's not fair." Fair, people who take what is not theirs love that word. They use it like perfume over rot. She turned into my driveway without asking. My house looked smaller than I remembered, hunched beneath wet oak branches. Helen's flower pots still sat on the porch, dead from my days in the hospital. I had watered them every morning after she passed, not because they could be saved, but because grief needs a task. Marissa put the car in park, but did not turn it off. "Caleb has been carrying a lot," she said. "The diner, your health, the finances. He didn't want you to know how bad things were." "What finances?" She reached into the back seat and handed me a packet. She had prepared it. Of course she had. Marissa did not improvise, she staged. Inside were photocopies of invoices, late notices, payroll reports, tax summaries. Some were real. Some had numbers that felt wrong in the way a familiar room feels wrong when one chair has been moved. I had run the diner for decades. I knew what bacon cost. I knew what electricity cost. I knew when a vendor name did not belong to any vendor I had ever used. "You see," she said gently, "Caleb didn't sell your legacy. He saved you from losing it publicly." "Who bought it?" Her eyes flicked toward the windshield. "A restaurant group. Name: Harbor Table Holdings." I laughed once, not because anything was funny. Harbor Table was the kind of clean name people gave dirty money after they washed it. "Who owns it?" "Investors." "Marissa." She exhaled. "My cousin has a minority stake, but that actually helped. They gave Caleb a better offer because of the family connection." There it was, tucked inside concern like a hook in bread. I opened the packet again. Near the bottom was a letter supposedly signed by me. It authorized Caleb to negotiate emergency transfer options in case of medical incapacity. My signature sat at the bottom, familiar enough to wound me, wrong enough to make my skin go cold. "That is not my signature." Marissa reached for my arm. I pulled away before she touched me. "Eli," she whispered, and her sympathy voice became softer, more dangerous. "The hospital gave you medication. You were confused. You may not remember signing things." "I remember my own hand." "Do you? Because Caleb has been worried about that too." She let the sentence hang there. It was a threat dressed as concern. If I fought them, they would say I was declining. If I accused them, they would say grief had made me paranoid. If I shouted, they would have proof. Marissa took a folded brochure from her purse and placed it on top of the packet. "Silver Pines, Assisted Living." My breath went shallow. "Just for a month," she said. "Somewhere safe, somewhere people can help you adjust." I looked from the brochure to her perfect face. "When did you print that?" Her smile did not move, but her eyes did. That small flicker told me she had printed it before I ever came home from the hospital. They had not just sold the diner. They had planned what to do with me afterward. After she drove away, I stood on the porch with the Silver Pines brochure in one hand and the fake authorization in the other. The rain had stopped, but everything still looked wet and bruised. For years, I had believed danger would announce itself with shouting. I had not understood that the worst kind walks you home, lowers its voice, and tells you the cage is for your comfort. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the new lock, then the brochure, then my signature at the bottom of a letter I had never written. At 3 in the morning, I went to Helen's sewing room. After she died, I had left that room untouched. Her blue cardigan still hung on the chair. A half-finished quilt lay folded beside the machine. On the windowsill sat a chipped mug full of buttons she had collected from shirts too worn to save. I used to tease her about keeping useless things. "You never know what will hold something together," she would say. I switched on the lamp and stood in the doorway until I could breathe again. Helen had been the bookkeeper for Pop's Diner for 32 years. Customers knew me because I stood out front. Vendors respected me because I paid on time. But Helen knew the blood flow of the place. She knew when a supplier padded a bill. She knew when a cashier slipped 20s. She knew when Caleb, at 19, started taking gas money from the tip jar and lying about it with tears in his eyes. I opened her desk drawer. Nothing. I opened the file cabinet. Tax returns, insurance papers, old recipes, photographs of Caleb as a boy with flour on his cheeks. At the bottom of the cabinet was a shoebox labeled Christmas RIBBONS. Helen hated mislabeled boxes. That was how I knew. Inside, beneath curled ribbon and tissue paper, was a red ledger. My hands shook when I opened it. The first pages were ordinary. Notes about payroll, vendor changes, repairs needed after the dishwasher leak. Then the tone shifted. Dates appeared in Helen's neat handwriting, deposit shortages, duplicate invoices, transfers marked consulting. A name repeated over and over. M. Voss. Marissa Voss, before she became Marissa Carter. I turned pages faster. Helen had tracked payments from the diner account to a shell cleaning company registered to Marissa's mother. She had noted checks Caleb claimed were for equipment but never matched any delivery. She had pasted copies of emails printed from the office computer, messages between Caleb and Marissa about moving Dad away from the numbers. One line made my vision blur. If anything happens to me, Eli must check the printer archive. The printer archive. I sat down hard in Helen's chair. Most people thought Pops was stubborn because he refused to modernize. He kept the old register long after Caleb begged for sleek tablets. He kept paper receipts. He kept the impact printer beneath the counter that chattered like a trapped cricket whenever a transaction was voided, refunded, discounted, or reopened. But Pops had not kept it out of nostalgia. Years before he died, a cook had skimmed cash by deleting orders after customers paid. Pops bought a receipt printer with an internal journal and wired it to duplicate certain transactions in the back office. Machines don't love you, he told me. That's why they tell the truth. Caleb hated that printer. He called it embarrassing. Marissa called it antique junk. Helen called it insurance. I flipped to the last page of the ledger. There was a key taped inside the back cover, not a door key, smaller, brass, the kind used for an old cabinet. Under it, Helen had written, "Pops kept the spare under the false bottom of the sugar bin." I moved it after Caleb asked too many questions. I pressed the key into my palm until the teeth hurt. For the first time since the hospital, I felt something stronger than grief. Not anger yet. Anger is loud and careless. This was colder. It was the feeling of a man realizing his wife had been fighting beside him even after death. By morning, Caleb had already turned the town against me. The post appeared on Facebook at 7:12 a.m., a photograph of him standing outside the diner with one hand on the front door, head bowed. Marissa must have taken it. The caption was long, polished, and cruel. Some family decisions are heartbreaking. Dad's health has declined faster than we expected, and after his recent hospitalization, we had to make choices to protect his legacy and ensure he receives the care he deserves. Pops' diner will be entering a new chapter. Please pray for our family. By 7:40, there were 87 comments. You're a good son. Your dad is lucky to have you. So sad, but you did the right thing. At 8:03, my neighbor Linda knocked on my door holding banana bread like it was a condolence gift. "I'm so sorry, Eli," she said. Caleb explained everything. Everything, that word again. I invited her in because Helen would have. Linda sat at the kitchen table and glanced at the pill bottles lined up near the sink. Her eyes softened with pity. Pity is easier for people than doubt. "Did Caleb tell you I signed away the diner while medicated?" I asked. Her mouth opened, closed. "He said you had given him power of attorney." "I gave him power to pick up prescriptions while I was in the hospital." Linda looked down at her hands. "And he said you were getting confused sometimes." There it was. The poison had already been poured. After she left, I called our attorney, Martin Bell. He had handled the deed when Pops passed the diner to me. His receptionist put me on hold twice before Martin came on the line, sounding older than his voicemail. "Eli," he said, "I was meaning to call." "Then mean faster." He sighed. Caleb contacted me last week. He said you were considering transition options. I was unconscious last week. Silence. Did you prepare documents? I asked. I reviewed a draft authorization. With my signature. Eli. Did you witness me sign it? No. Did you notarize it? No, the notarization was done externally. By whom? More silence, then paper rustling. Marissa's colleague, Dana Pike. I wrote the name on Helen's ledger page. Martin lowered his voice. I told Caleb the authorization was limited. I told him a full transfer required your direct consent unless incapacity had been legally established. And he said the buyers understood. He said closing was conditional. Did it close? I don't know. A lawyer saying, I don't know, is a thunderstorm in a glass. When I hung up, Caleb called. I let it ring. Then Marissa called. Then Caleb again. Then a text arrived. Dad, please don't make this harder. People are worried. If you keep acting like this, I'll have no choice but to ask the doctor for a capacity evaluation. I stared at the words until they blurred. They were building a cage out of concern. That afternoon, I drove to the diner and parked across the street. The front window had brown paper taped across it. A temporary sign read, "Coming soon, Harbor Table Kitchen." My father's name had been covered in one morning. Inside the reflection of the glass, I saw myself, gray, tired, smaller than I felt in my own memories. Then I saw something behind the counter. A cord trailing beneath the register. The receipt printer was still there. They had taken the photographs, changed the locks, and erased the menu. But they had not unplugged Pops. I read the comments until I hated myself for reading them. People were not cruel. That almost made it worse. They were kind in the direction Caleb pointed them. Every heart emoji, every prayer, every sentence calling him a devoted son became one more brick in the wall he was building around me. By breakfast, my whole town had been invited to pity me instead of believe me. It is easy for strangers to imagine betrayal as a sudden thing. A son steals a diner, a wife hides money, a daughter-in-law smiles while sharpening paperwork. But betrayal is rarely born grown. It starts small enough to forgive. Caleb was 7 the first time he lied with tears in his eyes. He had taken a $5 bill from Helen's purse to buy baseball cards. When she found the empty wrapper under his bed, he cried so hard she hugged him before she punished him. Pops watched from the doorway and said nothing until later. That boy is not crying because he did wrong, Pops told me. He is crying because getting caught feels unfair to him. I got angry, not at Caleb, at Pops. He's a child, so teach him while he still is. I did not enough. When Caleb was 16, he crashed my truck after sneaking out. I paid the damage and told him one day he would understand sacrifice. When he was 23, he quit culinary school because the instructors didn't respect vision. I gave him a job managing evening shifts. When he was 31, he married Marissa after knowing her 6 months and asked to borrow money for a house he could not afford. Helen said no. I said yes. The house was sold 2 years later at a loss. Caleb blamed the market. Marissa blamed hidden defects. Helen quietly showed me credit card statements for marble countertops and designer light fixtures. We kept helping. Parents call it love when we pay to postpone the truth. The morning after I saw the printer cord, I sat in my truck outside the diner and remembered Caleb at 10 years old, asleep in the office booth after a little league game, ketchup on his shirt and one shoe missing. Pops had draped his apron over him like a blanket. That boy needs roots, Pops said. He has us. Pops looked toward the register. Roots aren't people, roots are limits. Without limits, people grow into whatever gives them shade. I hated how often dead men become wise after you cannot apologize to them. At noon, Caleb walked out of the diner with Marissa and a man in a navy suit. They laughed. Caleb looked younger when he laughed with people he wanted to impress, as if charm could peel years off a lie. The suited man shook his hand and clapped him on the shoulder. Marissa noticed my truck first. Her smile vanished, then returned sharper. Caleb crossed the street. I rolled down the window. You need to stop stalking the property, he said. The property has my name on the deed. Not for long. He regretted it as soon as he said it. I saw the sentence land between us, naked and ugly. Explain that. His jaw worked. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. I heard you clearly. Marissa called from the curb. Caleb, don't engage. Don't engage, like I was a hostile witness. Caleb leaned closer to the truck window. His breath smelled like mint gum. You want the truth, he whispered. The diner was dying. You were dying with it. I'm the only one brave enough to do what needed to be done. And the forged signature. His eyes flickered. There it was, not fear, calculation. I don't know what Marissa showed you, he said, but you should be careful accusing people. At your age, confusion can look a lot like certainty. Then he stepped back, public face restored. I love you, Dad, he said loudly. Please let us help. The suited man watched from across the street. Marissa watched too. I understood then that Caleb was not improvising cruelty. He had practiced it in mirrors. He knew exactly where to press so the world would see a concerned son and I would feel the blade. I drove away before my hands betrayed me. That night I opened Helen's ledger again and turned to the page about the printer archive. Pops had taught me limits too late, but evidence does not care how late a lesson arrives. Dana Pike worked out of a glass building above a boutique gym, which told me everything I needed to know before she opened her mouth. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and new carpet. A framed certificate hung behind her desk. Her nails were clean, pale pink, and too perfect for a woman who claimed she had watched an old diner owner sign emergency documents in a hospital room. She blinked when I gave my name. Mr. Carter, she said, standing too quickly. I wasn't expecting you. People rarely expect the man they helped bury. Her smile collapsed. I did not sit. Sitting makes dishonest people comfortable. I placed a copy of the authorization on her desk. You notarized this. Dana glanced at it and folded her hands. I notarize many documents. But do you remember this one? I would have to check my journal. Please. She opened a drawer slowly. Her notary journal was navy blue. She flipped pages with theatrical care, then stopped. Yes, here it is. Read the identification used. Her lips pressed together. Driver's license. Was I present? Mr. Carter, if I notarized. Was I present? She looked toward the door. I followed proper procedure. That was not an answer. It was a barricade. Dana, I said, gentler than I felt, my wife is dead. My son has sold my father's diner using a document I did not sign. I am asking you one simple thing before I involve police. The word police made her swallow. I was told you were unable to come in, she said. By Marissa. No answer. Were you given my license? She had a copy. Was I on video call? Dana's face changed. There it was, the missing piece. She said the hospital connection kept dropping. Caleb was there, he confirmed. Caleb confirmed I was signing a document on a video call you never completed. I believed. You believed the woman who sent business to you. Her eyes shined with defensive tears. I had no patience for them. Tears are not repentance when they arrive before responsibility. I took a small recorder from my pocket and set it on her desk. I had not turned it on. I wanted to see her reaction. Dana stared at it. I can't discuss this further without counsel, she said. Good, bring counsel, bring your journal, bring every email Marissa sent you. I picked up the copy and walked to the door. Behind me, Dana whispered, she said it was for your own good. I turned back. People who steal from old men always say that. Outside, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Carter, this is Andrew Vale from Harbor Table Holdings. I understand there may be some confusion. I'd like to meet and resolve this peacefully. Peacefully? A man does not ask for peace unless he knows war is possible. I drove to the public library instead of home. Helen used to say a library was the safest place to be dangerous. I logged into the county records database and searched Harbor Table Holdings. Registered agent, Andrew Vale. Members, Vale Hospitality Group, M. Carter Consulting, Voss Family Investments. M. Carter. Marissa Carter. not a cousin's minority stake. Ownership. My daughter-in-law was not helping my son sell the diner. She was buying it from him through a company that hid her name badly enough for a grieving old man to find in 20 minutes. I printed every page. As the printer spat paper into the tray, I thought of Pop's old machine under the counter, still waiting in the dark. Clean nails, dirty hands, paper trails. They had built a fraud out of signatures and sympathy. But Helen had always said fraud was like flour on a black shirt. Shake hard enough and it shows everywhere. Before leaving the library, I made 3 sets of copies and paid in quarters because the machine refused my card. The old librarian watched me feed page after page through the copier. She did not ask questions. People who work around books understand that some stories need evidence before they deserve an audience. Caleb did not ask me to tour Silver Pines. He announced it. He arrived at my house the next morning with Marissa, a social worker I had never met, and a face arranged into exhausted love. They came in through the front door because I had not yet learned to bolt it against my own blood. The social worker's name was Priya. She was young, kind-eyed, and uncomfortable in the way good people become when bad people use them as props. "We're not here to force anything," she said. Marissa touched her arm lightly. "Of course not. We just want Dad to feel supported." "Dad," she used it because Priya was there. Caleb set a folder on my kitchen table. "We've booked a short-term respite room, 30 days. Doctors recommend routine after cardiac episodes." My doctor recommended low sodium and rest. He also recommended reduced stress. And you decided kidnapping my life would reduce it. Priya's eyes moved between us. Marissa lowered her voice. "This is what we mean, the paranoia, the aggression." "Careful," I said. Her lips parted, offended and pleased. She wanted me angry. Anger would complete the picture. Caleb slid a paper toward Priya. "He's been accusing us of forging documents." "Because you forged documents." Priya inhaled. Marissa shook her head sadly. "Eli, you signed authorizations during hospitalization. We know you don't remember. That must be terrifying." She was good, I will give her that. She could turn theft into my symptom without raising her voice. I stood slowly, walked to Helen's sewing room, and returned with 3 copies. County ownership records, Dana Pike's notarization page, the limited prescription authorization Caleb had been given with its narrow language highlighted. I placed them in front of Priya. "Read before you label me confused." Caleb's face went still. Marissa reached for the papers. Priya got there first. The kitchen became silent, except for the refrigerator hum and the old wall clock Helen had hated because it ticked too loudly. Priya read, then read again. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully, "do you have an attorney?" "I'm getting one who still has a spine." Caleb slammed his palm on the table. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." There he was. The mask cracked, and the boy Pops warned me about looked out through my son's eyes. Priya closed the folder she had brought. "I don't think this is an appropriate time for a placement discussion." Marissa's voice sharpened. "With respect, you don't understand the family history." "No," Priya said, standing, "but I understand coercion concerns." She gave me her card before leaving. Caleb followed her to the porch, speaking low and fast. Marissa stayed in the kitchen with me. For the first time, she did not smile. "You're making a mistake," she said. "I made the mistake when I let him marry you without asking what hunger you brought into my family." Her eyes narrowed. "You think this is about me?" "I think Caleb lies for comfort. You lie for sport." She leaned closer. Her perfume smelled expensive and cold. "You have no idea what your precious diner was worth." "I know what it cost." "That's the problem with sentimental men," she said. "You confuse cost with value." Then she turned and walked out. Through the window, I watched Caleb and Marissa argue beside the SUV. Priya drove away without looking back. My phone buzzed again. "Andrew Vale, we really should talk before this becomes damaging for everyone." Everyone. I had spent my life feeding everyone, forgiving everyone, paying for everyone. Now everyone was becoming a word people used when they meant themselves. I texted back one sentence: bring the purchase agreement or bring a lawyer. Breaking into your own diner feels different than you imagine. I did not smash a window. I did not pry a lock. I did not creep through shadows like a thief, though my pulse insisted I was one. I waited until 2:17 in the morning, when the rain came hard enough to empty the sidewalks, and used the alley gate code Pops had chosen in 1989. 7:24. Helen's birthday. Caleb had changed the door locks, but he had not changed the gate code because Caleb never respected what he considered old. The back window above the flower rack had been painted shut for years. I knew because I had never repaired it after the summer Joey Nolan got stuck halfway through trying to sneak in for beer. I also knew the latch could be lifted from outside with a bent pie server. My knees hated me. My heart scolded me. Pops would have laughed himself sick watching me climb into that storage room at 71. Inside, the diner smelled wrong, not dead, exactly, stripped, the way a house smells after strangers remove family photographs. The menu boards were gone. The stools had been stacked. Blue painter's tape marked the floor where new walls would go. Harbor Table planned to gut us from the inside out. I moved behind the counter with a flashlight held low. The old register sat covered in plastic. Beneath it, dusty and stubborn, was the receipt printer. I touched its top, like greeting a sleeping dog. The power light glowed green. My throat closed. Pops, you beautiful paranoid old man. The office cabinet key from Helen's ledger fit the bottom drawer. Inside were rolls of printer tape, a manual, 2 envelopes of backup memory cards, and a note in Pop's block letters. If you are reading this, somebody got greedy. I laughed so hard it almost became a sob. The printer's internal journal was ancient but functional. Helen had written instructions in the manual margins: hold feed, enter supervisor code, print audit range, voids, refunds, no sales, drawer opens, training mode entries. The supervisor code was not my birthday, not Caleb's, not Helen. It was 1946, the year Pops came home from war and decided he would never work under a cruel man again. The printer screamed to life. Paper spilled out in a thin white tongue. I watched transaction after transaction print from the past 18 months. Voids after cash payments. Refunds issued without cards present. Drawer openings at 11:47 p.m., 12:13 a.m., 1:02 a.m. training mode used on Sundays when the diner was closed. Then names appeared in the memo fields. M. Carter, Consulting. VOSS, Cleaning. Harbor Table Prep. The register had recorded internal notes from linked bookkeeping software every time Caleb tried to hide entries under routine adjustments. He thought he was deleting orders. The printer had kept the ghosts. I fed roll after roll through the machine. At 3:06 a.m., headlights swept across the front windows. I froze. A car door slammed outside. Then another. I killed the flashlight and crouched behind the counter as keys rattled at the front door. Marissa's voice cut through the rain. I told you he'd come here. Caleb answered, low and furious. Just get the box and go. The lock clicked. They stepped into the diner with a flashlight of their own, and for one impossible second, I was not an old man hiding behind a counter. I was a boy again under Pop's booth, listening to adults lie above me. Marissa walked straight to the office. Where the printer archive, she whispered. Caleb said Helen must have moved it. My fingers tightened around 6 feet of printed paper. They knew, but they were late. The audit tape kept curling around my shoes, fragile as a streamer after a party nobody enjoyed. I thought of all the nights Helen had balanced the drawer while I wiped counters. She would tap the adding machine twice before trusting a number. I used to call it superstition. Now it felt like devotion. Caleb and Marissa argued in whispers because criminals always believe quiet makes them innocent. From behind the counter, I could see their shoes. Caleb wore the brown leather ones I had bought him for job interviews. Marissa wore black heels that clicked on the floor Helen used to mop every night after close. The sound made something ugly move in my chest. "It's gone," Marissa hissed. "What do you mean gone?" "The drawer is open, Caleb." "Maybe the movers." "The movers did not know your grandfather was a lunatic who hid backup journals in office furniture." "Do not laugh," I told myself. "Do not breathe too hard. Do not let grief become noise." Caleb paced. "Dad wouldn't know how to access it." "Your mother would." "My mother is dead." There was a pause. When Marissa spoke again, her voice was softer, colder. "Yes," conveniently, after she started asking questions. The sentence fell into the diner like a plate shattering. For a moment, even Caleb stopped moving. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means she was a problem, then she was." "Don't say it like that." "Like what?" "Like the truth. My mother had a stroke. She had stress because she could not leave things alone." My hand clamped over my mouth. Helen's death had been sudden, yes. A stroke in the garden, the doctor said. High blood pressure, family history, age. I had believed medicine because medicine sounded cleaner than suspicion. Caleb's voice shook. "You promised me nothing. We did hurt her." "We didn't touch her." "That's not what I asked." Marissa exhaled with irritation, as if discussing a scheduling error. "I sent her the Leon notice, that's all." "What Leon notice?" "The one showing the diner would be seized if she didn't convince Eli to sell." "There was no Leon." "She didn't know that." Silence. I could picture Caleb's face. The confusion, the fear, the slow dawning that he had not been the mastermind in his own betrayal. He had been the useful son, the weak hinge Marissa pushed until the door opened. "You told me she knew everything," Caleb whispered. "I told you what you needed to keep moving." "My mother died 2 days after that letter." "And whose fault is that? Mine, because she couldn't handle reality, or yours, because you kept taking money until there was no way back?" Caleb made a sound I had not heard since he was a child. Marissa heard it too. Her tone changed instantly. "Baby," she said, "listen to me. We are almost clear. Harbor table finalizes Monday. Your father goes into Silver Pines. We control the estate planning. We pay back the messy accounts. Nobody goes to prison." Prison! There are words that unlock a room. I took out my phone. The screen lit beneath the counter. Recording 11 minutes 43 seconds. I had started it when their headlights arrived. Caleb whispered, "Dad won't go quietly." Marissa laughed once. "Then he'll go loudly and everyone will call it dementia." My body wanted to stand. My bones wanted justice with fists. But Pops had warned me about swinging. So I stayed hidden while my son learned the shape of his wife's soul in the dark. Then the old receipt printer made a sound. A tiny mechanical click. Both of them went silent. Marissa said, "Did you hear that?" I looked down. The printer had advanced another line on its own, triggered by the audit command still running. Caleb's flashlight turned toward the counter. There was nowhere left to hide. When Caleb saw me, he looked less like a criminal than a boy caught with matches. Marissa looked like herself. She did not gasp. She did not apologize. She calculated distance, her body to mine, mine to the back door, the phone in my hand, the paper in my grip. Her eyes moved with cold speed. "Eli," she said, "you're trespassing. In my diner. It is under contract. Not with my consent." Caleb stepped forward. "Dad, give me the paper." "No." His face twisted. "You don't understand what you're holding." "I understand enough." Marissa's gaze dropped to my phone. "Were you recording us?" I smiled then, not because I felt joy, but because she had finally asked the right question too late. She moved first. I was older, slower, and still weak from the hospital. She crossed the space between us before Caleb could react and grabbed for the phone. I jerked back, hit the stool behind me, and pain flashed white across my ribs. The roll of printed audit tape spilled from my hand like a paper snake. Caleb shouted her name. Marissa clawed at my wrist. "Give it to me." I tried to turn away. My heel caught the mat behind the counter. I fell hard against the lower cabinet, shoulder first, then hip, then head. The diner tilted. For 1 second I saw the underside of the counter, old gum stuck there from decades ago, and thought absurdly that Helen would have made me scrape it. Caleb shoved Marissa back. "What are you doing?" he yelled. "What you should have done." I could not breathe. The phone lay under the pie case, screen glowing. Recording, 14 minutes, 8 seconds. Marissa saw it too. Caleb stood between her and the phone. That was the first decent thing he had done in months, and it was already too late to save him from what he had become. "Move," she said. "No. Caleb. No." The word cracked through the diner. For a moment I saw the child he had been, not innocent, never innocent the way parents pretend, but not lost, not fully. He bent and picked up my phone. His hands shook. Marissa's voice became honey poured over glass. "Baby, think. If he turns that in, we both go down." Caleb looked at me on the floor. I could not tell whether his tears were for me, Helen, himself, or the prison sentence forming in his imagination. "You said Mom knew," he whispered. Marissa's face hardened. "Your mother was going to ruin us. She was my mother. She was an obstacle." The old diner absorbed the words. The walls, the stools, the empty pie case. Every place Helen had touched heard Marissa confess what she had never meant to say in daylight. Caleb stared at her as if seeing a stranger wearing his wife's coat. Then blue lights flashed across the front windows. Marissa turned slowly. Through the glass, I saw 2 police cruisers pull to the curb. Caleb looked at the phone in his hand. The call screen was open beneath the recording app. 911 connected. Maybe he had called when I fell. Maybe accidentally, maybe not. Marissa whispered, "What did you do?" Caleb did not answer. He knelt beside me instead. "Dad," he said, voice broken, "I'm sorry." I wanted to believe him. That was the cruelest part. Lying on that floor, I understood how easily old men disappear. One fall, one worried son, one polished wife saying he has not been himself, and suddenly your words become symptoms. The thought frightened me more than the pain. It meant Marissa had not only planned to take my property, she had planned to take my credibility, which is the last address a man owns. They took me back to the same hospital I had just escaped. Same ceiling tiles, same antiseptic smell, same machines clicking like tiny judges beside the bed. A nurse with silver braids asked me if I felt safe at home, and I almost laughed. Home had become a legal question. My shoulder was bruised but not broken. My ribs were cracked. My head needed 4 stitches. The doctor said I was lucky. Lucky is a word people use when they cannot bear to name what almost happened. Detective Harlan came at 6:40 a.m. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a notebook that had seen worse families than mine. He sat beside my bed, not across from it. I appreciated that. "Your son says his wife assaulted you trying to take your phone," he said. "My son says many things. He also gave us the phone." That hurt in a way I did not expect. Not because Caleb had finally done right, but because some starving part of me still wanted to be proud of him for dropping a match after burning the house. Harlan continued, "We have the recording. We also recovered printed audit logs from the diner. Officers found several documents in Mrs. Carter's vehicle." "Marissa." "Yes. Where is she?" "Being interviewed." "Caleb." "Also being interviewed." I closed my eyes. Harlan waited. I liked him more for that. People rush grief because they do not want it touching them. "My wife," I said. "Helen, there was a fake Leon notice." Harlan's pen moved. "Marissa admitted sending it. Helen died 2 days later." "We'll look into it." That phrase can mean everything or nothing. I opened my eyes and held his gaze. "Look hard." He nodded once. After he left, Martin Bell arrived looking like a man who had aged 5 years overnight. He carried no briefcase, only a legal pad and shame. "I should have pushed harder," he said. "Yes." He sat down. "I contacted the buyer's counsel. The closing has not finalized. Given the fraud allegations, they are freezing the transaction. Harbor table is Marissa. I know now. Knowing now is popular this week." He accepted that without flinching. Good. Shame should sit still when spoken to. Martin explained what came next. injunctions, affidavits, police reports, bank subpoenas, capacity documentation, signature analysis. The language sounded clean. The reality beneath it was mud. My son had helped forge a path to steal my diner. My daughter-in-law had used his weakness and maybe hastened my wife's death with a lie. When Martin finished, he said, "Eli, Caleb is asking to see you." "No. He says he wants to tell the truth. He can tell it to the detective." Martin nodded. After he left, I turned my face toward the window. Snow had started, thin and uncertain, dissolving against the glass. I thought of Helen in the garden, one hand pressed to her chest, a fake Leon letter on the kitchen table. I had found it after her funeral and assumed it was junk mail. I had thrown it away while telling myself paperwork did not matter anymore. Paperwork had killed more than businesses in my family. A nurse brought lunch I did not eat. On the tray was a receipt for the cafeteria charge. Date, time, item, total, a tiny record of something ordinary. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Pops had been right. The smallest papers survived the biggest lies. I found Helen's letter because Marissa had missed what grief protects. 3 days after the hospital released me, Linda drove me home. Priya had arranged a home health aide, not because I was incapable, but because walking with cracked ribs makes pride look stupid. The first thing I did was bolt the front door. The second was go to the garden. Helen had kept a rusted green bench beneath the maple tree. She said it was ugly enough to discourage thieves and comfortable enough to forgive itself. Beneath the bench was a ceramic frog Caleb made in 4th grade. Its paint had peeled until it looked diseased. I lifted it. Underneath, wrapped in freezer plastic and sealed inside a coffee tin, was an envelope with my name. Eli. My knees weakened before I opened it. Her handwriting crossed the page in blue ink, firm in places, shaky in others. My love, if you are reading this, I waited too long to tell you everything. I did not want to break your heart about Caleb. I kept thinking he would confess or stop or remember who raised him. That was my mistake. Love is not a cure for greed. Marissa has been moving money through false vendors. Caleb knows part of it. I do not think he knows all of it. She has been pressuring him to push you out before you discover the accounts. If anything happens, check the printer archive, the red ledger, and the email folder called recipes on the office computer. I know you will blame yourself. Don't. You gave our son chances, he sold them. Promise me one thing, do not protect him from the truth. Protect what is left of yourself. I love you more than the first morning coffee, more than the sound of rain on the diner roof, more than all our ordinary days. AITA. I sat on the wet grass and cried in a way I had not allowed myself at her funeral, not quiet tears, not dignified grief, the kind that empties an old man until birds stop singing around him. Linda found me 20 minutes later and said nothing. She sat on the grass beside me even though her church pants got muddy. When I could speak, I handed her the letter. She read it and covered her mouth. I believed Caleb, she whispered. Most people did. I'm sorry. Then help me stop them. By evening, Linda had called 3 people from church, 2 former diner employees, and her nephew who worked in local radio. Not to gossip, she said, to correct the record. Correcting the record is just gossip wearing clean shoes, but I let her. Meanwhile, Detective Harlan obtained a warrant for the office computer. The folder called Recipes contained no recipes. It contained scanned invoices, emails, fake vendor forms, and a spreadsheet Helen had built with color-coded theft. At 9:12 p.m., Harlan called. Mr. Carter, he said, your wife was thorough. Yes, sir. We found the fake Leon notice file on Marissa's laptop. I closed my eyes. She created it. Metadata suggests so. Metadata, another small ghost that tells the truth. What happens now? Now people who thought this was a family misunderstanding start calling it fraud. After we hung up, I placed Helen's letter beside the red ledger on the kitchen table. For months, Marissa had treated my grief like a fog she could move through unseen. She had forgotten that Helen knew how to leave lanterns. That night I placed the coffee tin on Helen's side of the bed. It was a foolish thing to do, but grief is full of rituals that would embarrass us if they did not keep us alive. I slept with the lamp on and dreamed of her standing in the diner doorway, not waving goodbye, but pointing me back inside. Marissa requested the town meeting. That was the arrogance of it. Even after the police interview, even after the frozen sale, even after people started whispering that Caleb's Facebook post had aged badly, she believed a public performance could save her. The meeting was announced as a community conversation about Pop's, diner, and elder care concerns. It took place in the fellowship hall at church because Pastor Reed still believed neutral rooms existed. I arrived with Linda on one side and Martin on the other. My ribs ached. My face was yellowing around the stitches. I wore the navy sweater Helen liked because it made me look, in her words, less like a man who argues with plumbing. The hall was full. Former waitresses, vendors, regulars. People who had eaten Pop's pancakes after funerals, after graduations, after divorces they pretended were mutual. They looked at me with a mixture of pity, guilt, and curiosity. Caleb sat in the front row alone. Marissa sat 2 seats away from him, close enough to claim marriage, far enough to deny strategy. Her attorney stood behind her. Pastor Reed opened with prayer. Marissa closed her eyes and bowed her head like a woman posing for a sculpture of innocence. Then she stood. "I love this family," she began. I almost admired the audacity. She spoke about stress, aging, difficult decisions, the burden Caleb carried, my health, the diner's financial decline. She used words like compassion and sustainability. She said accusations had been made in grief. She said she hoped we could heal privately. Privately, the preferred burial place of public thieves. When she finished, some people looked unsure again. That was her gift. She made doubt feel kind. Pastor Reed turned to me. "Eli, would you like to respond?" I stood slowly. "I would." Martin touched my elbow, not to stop me, to steady me. I walked to the folding table at the front and placed 3 things on it: Helen's red ledger, the audit tape from Pop's, receipt printer, and a small speaker connected to my phone. Marissa's face changed by 1 millimeter. "That was enough. I won't ask you to believe me," I said. "Belief is how we got here." The room went still. For weeks, my son and his wife told you I was confused. They said I signed documents I never signed. They said they sold Pop's diner to protect me. They said a care facility was kindness. They said many things. I lifted the audit tape. My father did not trust things people said. He trusted what cash drawers recorded when people thought nobody was looking. Marissa's attorney stepped forward. "This is inappropriate pending legal." Martin did not raise his voice. "Sit down." Something about the way he said it made the attorney sit. I pressed play. Marissa's voice filled the fellowship hall. "Your mother was going to ruin us. Then Caleb. My mother died 2 days after that letter. Then Marissa again. And whose fault is that? Mine, because she couldn't handle reality, or yours, because you kept taking money until there was no way back." A woman in the back gasped. Caleb lowered his head. Marissa stood frozen, stripped of lighting, script, and sympathy. The recording continued. "If he doesn't go quietly, he'll go loudly, and everyone will call it dementia." Pastor Reed whispered, "Dear God." I stopped the audio. "My wife left evidence," I said. "My father left a machine that remembered. I am done asking this town to choose between my age and their lies." Then Caleb stood. His face was wet. "I helped," he said. Marissa turned on him. "Don't." But the boy I raised, the man who betrayed me, the son who might still have one truth left, looked at the room and spoke. "I helped forge the sale." The fellowship hall erupted. And for the first time since Helen died, Marissa had no room left to perform. Confession did not make Caleb noble. That is something stories often get wrong. A man who tells the truth after every exit burns is not brave in the same way a man is brave before the fire. Caleb confessed because the recording cornered him, because Marissa had betrayed him too, because prison looked closer than forgiveness. But truth is useful, even when motives are ugly. Detective Harlan took Caleb's formal statement the next day. Martin attended on my behalf. I refused to sit across from my son while he described how he had stolen from me in chronological order. Martin came to my house afterward and read portions aloud. Caleb admitted he had authorized false vendor payments to cover personal debt. He admitted Marissa created companies to receive the money. He admitted they staged financial distress to justify selling the diner. He admitted he gave Marissa a scanned copy of my license. He admitted he told Dana Pike I was present on a video call when I was not. He says he didn't know Marissa owned part of Harbor Table, Martin said. Do you believe him? I believe he believed whatever made him less guilty at the time. That sounded like Caleb. The worst part was the amount, not because money mattered most, but because numbers refuse sentiment. Over 18 months, Caleb and Marissa had drained $186,400 from Pop's diner through false vendors, inflated repairs, consulting fees, cleaning contracts, and refund schemes. They had planned to sell the property undervalued to Harbor Table, then flip it after rezoning for luxury apartments and a restaurant concept that used the word heritage in its pitch deck. Heritage, they were going to erase us and sell the dust. What about Helen? I asked. Martin removed his glasses. Caleb says Marissa sent the fake lien notice without telling him. He says Helen confronted him the day before her stroke, but he denied everything. He says she was extremely upset. I looked towards the garden window. Anything criminal there? Hard to prove causation. Legal language is where grief goes to be starved. But, Martin added, the fake lien is fraud. Using it to pressure her may matter at sentencing. Sentencing, the word sat in my kitchen beside Helen's empty chair. That evening, Caleb called from a number I did not recognize. I let voicemail take it. His message was 91 seconds. Dad, I don't know what to say. I was weak. I was stupid. Marissa pushed, but I let her. I kept thinking I could fix it before you found out. I never wanted Mom hurt. I swear I never wanted that. Please, I know I don't deserve to ask, but please talk to me. I listened once. Then I played it again, not for tenderness, but for accuracy. He said Marissa pushed. He said he let her. He said he never wanted Helen hurt. He did not say he was sorry for making me look insane. He did not say he was sorry for Silver Pines. He did not say he was sorry for changing the locks. Regret, I learned, has favorite rooms. It visits the places where consequences sleep and avoids the places where cruelty lived. I saved the voicemail for Martin. Then I deleted it from my heart. A father can love a son and still refuse to be his shelter. That night I brewed coffee the way Helen hated, too strong and too late. I sat at the kitchen table with Pop's audit tape stretched across the floor, a paper road out of hell. Every line was a theft. Every line was a witness. Every line said the same thing. They thought family meant I would never count. They forgot who taught me numbers. I wanted his confession to wash something clean. Instead, it named the stains. That is the first disappointment of truth. It does not repair the table. It only turns on the light so you can finally see every scratch, every burn mark, every place someone carved their hunger into wood you thought was solid. Marissa's mother came to my house wearing funeral black, though nobody had invited mourning. Her name was Evelyn Voss, and I had met her twice before, once at the wedding, once at Caleb and Marissa's housewarming, where she complimented Helen's pie by asking if it was store-bought. She carried herself like a woman who believed money was proof of moral intelligence. Linda answered the door before I could reach it. I was beginning to enjoy having a witness in the house. Mrs. Voss, Linda said, voice sweet as poison. What a surprise. Evelyn looked past her. I need to speak with Eli. I stood in the hallway. No, you don't. She stepped inside anyway. Linda blocked her with one hip, which was impressive for a woman holding tea. This can be resolved, Evelyn said. Your daughter attacked me. My daughter panicked because your son dragged her into his mess. I laughed. Evelyn's face tightened. People like her hate laughter when they have dressed for intimidation. She owns part of Harbor Table, I said. Her companies took diner money. She forged pressure documents. She tried to put me in a facility. Allegedly. Leave. Listen to me, you stubborn old man. Linda set down her tea. Evelyn continued, Marissa is willing to sign away any claim to the diner. She will cooperate regarding Caleb's financial misconduct. In exchange, you stop implying she caused your wife's death. The house went quiet. Helen's clock ticked in the living room. You came here to bargain with my wife's grave. I came to prevent unnecessary destruction. Whose? Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Do you know what trials do to families, to reputations, to property values? Your wife is gone, no verdict brings her back. There it was, the philosophy of predators. If damage cannot be undone, why punish the person who caused it? I walked to the side table and picked up Helen's garden letter. I did not hand it to Evelyn. She did not deserve to touch it. My wife knew, I said. She hid evidence because your daughter frightened her. She left instructions because she expected me to be outnumbered. She died believing our son was helping steal the life we built. So when you say no verdict brings her back, understand this. I am not trying to raise the dead. I am trying to stop your daughter from feeding on the living. Evelyn's mouth trembled, not with grief, rage. You think you're righteous because you're old and sad. No, I think I'm late. Linda opened the door. Evelyn looked at me one last time. Marissa will not go down alone. She already chose her company. After she left, Linda locked the door and leaned against it. Well, she said, that woman has the warmth of a tax audit. I laughed until my ribs punished me. An hour later, Martin called. Evelyn had contacted him too. Her offer was real. Marissa would blame Caleb completely if we softened claims around Helen. No, I said. Eli, strategically. No. Martin was quiet. I don't need maximum revenge, I said. I need the whole truth available to breathe. Understood. After hanging up, I stood in Helen's sewing room and looked at the half-finished quilt. Blue squares, white border, tiny yellow pieces like lamplight. I had spent months avoiding the room because it hurt. Now it hurt differently. It no longer felt like a room where she ended. It felt like a room where she prepared me. Harbor Table tried one last trick before the court hearing. They scheduled an equipment auction. Not a public one, not properly advertised. A quiet liquidation of obsolete diner assets to recover holding costs while ownership questions were pending. They listed the grill pops seasoned with bacon fat for 39 years, the pie case Helen saved from tip money, the booths where half the town had confessed things they later regretted, and the receipt printer. That was how I knew they were desperate. Martin filed an emergency motion. Detective Harlan sent a warning about potential evidence tampering. Still, the auction company arrived with trucks at 7 in the morning because paperwork moves slower than greed. So did the town. Linda came first with coffee, then Pastor Reed, then 2 former cooks, 3 waitresses, my barber, the mailman, and a retired judge named Alice Merton, who still frightened men twice her size by saying, "Young man," softly. We stood on the sidewalk outside Pop's diner while the auction crew tried not to make eye contact. Caleb arrived in a borrowed car alone. He looked thinner, unshaven. Shame had made him smaller but not harmless. "Dad," he said, stopping several feet away. "No, I didn't know about the auction. You stopped getting the benefit of my doubt when you changed the locks." He flinched. "Good, some words should bruise." The auction manager, a red-faced man with a clipboard, approached me. "Sir, we have authorization from Harbor Table Holdings to remove assets." Judge Merton stepped forward. "And I have a retired license, too much free time, and a personal relationship with half the county clerk's office. Would you like to continue that sentence?" He did not. At 8:22, a sheriff's deputy arrived with the temporary restraining order Martin had secured. The auction stopped before a single stool left the floor. People clapped. I did not. Victory should not be confused with restoration. Inside the diner, under deputy supervision, Harlan's evidence technician removed the receipt printer, the office computer, file drawers, and security system. I watched the printer go into a sealed box. Pops would have hated being sealed in plastic. Caleb stood beside me, hands in his pockets. "Mom loved this place," he said. I stared through the window at the stripped walls. She loved people who kept trying to take it from her too. He swallowed. "I thought if I could get enough money, I could pay everything back and make Marissa happy." Marissa was not a weather system. You did not have to stand in her storm. "I know." "No," I said. "You know you got wet." He looked at me then, really looked, and maybe understood that my cruelty was not cruelty at all. It was accuracy finally arriving without a cushion. Before leaving, the evidence technician handed me a property receipt for the printer. One copy for police, one for owner. Owner. The word steadied me. For weeks, Caleb and Marissa had spoken about me like I was a man being gently removed from his own story. But here, on cheap carbon paper, the county still named me what I was. Owner. Not confused, not managed, not a burden. Owner. I folded the receipt and placed it beside the cafeteria receipt in my wallet. Small papers, big lies. Pops would have approved. When the trucks pulled away empty, nobody cheered for long. We all stood there looking at the brown paper in the windows, understanding that saving a thing is not the same as healing it. Still, the absence of loss can feel like mercy. That morning, mercy looked like stools still stacked inside where thieves had meant to leave bare floor. The courtroom smelled like burnt coffee and old wood, which made it feel more honest than most churches. Marissa arrived in a gray suit with her hair pulled back, no jewelry except a wedding ring she had not worn at the town meeting. Her attorney carried 2 boxes. Evelyn sat behind her, chin lifted like disgrace was something other people contracted. Caleb arrived with a public defender and did not sit near his wife. That separation said more than any opening statement. The hearing was supposed to be simple: freeze the sale, preserve assets, determine whether the transfer documents were valid pending criminal proceedings. But simple legal matters become theater when people who built lies are forced to stand under lights. Martin presented the forged authorization, signature expert preliminary findings, Dana Pike's journal inconsistencies, hospital records proving I was under observation during the alleged signing window, county records connecting Marissa to Harbor Table, the audit logs from Pop's printer. Line by line, the diner came back to life as evidence. Void cash ticket, 9:43 p.m. Refund issued, no customer card. Drawer opened, manager code Caleb. Vendor transfer, Voss cleaning. Harbor Table, consulting draft. Numbers marched through the courtroom carrying knives. Marissa's attorney argued stress, misunderstanding, family informality, emergency decision-making. He said Caleb had been overwhelmed. He said Marissa's ownership stake was disclosed within appropriate circles. He said my health created urgency. Then Judge Whitcomb leaned forward. "Counsel, are you suggesting urgency permits forged consent?" The attorney's mouth opened. "No, Your Honors." "Then stop suggesting it poetically." "I liked her immediately." Dana Pike testified next. Her clean nails were gone, replaced by chipped polish and trembling hands. She admitted she had not seen me sign. She admitted Marissa arranged the notarization. She admitted Caleb confirmed my supposed presence. She cried. Nobody hugged her. Then Caleb testified. "I kept my eyes on the coffee stain near the judge's bench while my son told the court he had lied. His voice broke when he mentioned Helen. The judge let him collect himself once, only once. Marissa watched him with the expression of a woman seeing a tool break. Finally, the recording from the diner played. "Your mother was going to ruin us. She was an obstacle. If he doesn't go quietly, he'll go loudly, and everyone will call it dementia." Even the bailiff looked angry. When the audio ended, Marissa's attorney requested a recess. Judge Whitcomb denied it. Her ruling took 6 minutes. The transfer was enjoined. Harbor Table could not enter, alter, sell, lease, remove, encumber, or profit from Pop's diner or its equipment. My capacity challenge was dismissed as unsupported and retaliatory. All related assets were frozen pending civil and criminal proceedings. Then she looked directly at Marissa. Mrs. Carter, this court is not a stage for weaponized concern. Marissa's face flushed. I felt Helen beside me so sharply, I almost turned. After the hearing, reporters from the local paper waited in the hall. Linda had tipped them off, then pretended innocence badly. Caleb approached me. "Dad," he said. I held up one hand. "No hallway apologies." He nodded, tears forming. "Will there ever be any kind?" I looked at him, my son, my thief, my failure, his own failure. "I don't know." It was the most honest thing I could give him. Outside, the air was cold enough to hurt. For the first time in months, I welcomed it. But justice did not arrive like thunder. It came in envelopes. Certified mail, court notices, bank disclosures, insurance letters, asset freezes, subpoenas, statements from vendors who had never cleaned anything, copies of copies of copies until my kitchen table looked like paper had declared war on grief. Marissa was charged with fraud, forgery, conspiracy, elder exploitation, and assault. Caleb was charged too, though his cooperation reduced the sharpest edges. Dana Pike lost her notary commission and faced charges of official misconduct. Andrew Vail claimed ignorance through 3 attorneys and resigned from Harbor Table before anyone asked him to. Cowards love distance once maps become evidence. The diner remained closed. I had won the right to keep it and lost the illusion that keeping something means it is unchanged. One morning, I stood inside with Linda and watched dust float through sunlight where customers used to sit. "Are you going to reopen?" she asked. I looked at the counter. The receipt printer was still with police. In its place was a square of clean dust. "I don't know. You say that a lot lately." "It's honest." She nodded. Helen would approve of honest. She would also tell you to fix that ceiling tile. I smiled despite myself. The town wanted a triumphant ending. They wanted me to reopen Pop's Diner with a ribbon cutting and free pie. They wanted Caleb to apologize publicly, Marissa to vanish in handcuffs, and me to become a symbol of resilience they could clap for before lunch. But real endings are not that clean. I missed my son even while hating what he had done. I missed Helen in ways that made rooms tilt. I missed the old certainty that family, even broken family, would never cross certain lines. It had. The line had been imaginary. Maybe all lines are until someone pays to build a fence. Caleb wrote me letters from his attorney's office. I read some, not all. He wrote about gambling debt, credit cards, Marissa's pressure, his shame. He wrote that every time he entered the diner after Helen died, he felt her watching him. Good, I thought. Then hated myself for thinking it. One letter included a cashier's check for money from a retirement account he liquidated. Restitution, the memo said. I held it for a long time. Restitution is a strange word. It suggests putting something back. But money cannot be returned to the morning Helen read a fake lien notice. Money cannot restore the way Linda looked at me after realizing she had believed a lie. Money cannot make a son unforge his father. Still, I deposited it into the diner account. Not forgiveness, accounting. At home, I began finishing Helen's quilt. I was terrible at it. My stitches wandered like drunk ants. Linda offered to help, but I refused. Some crooked things need to stay yours. Every night, I sewed one square and listened to the house breathe. 1 week before Marissa's plea hearing, Detective Harlan returned Helen's red ledger and copies of the printer audit. The original printer remained evidence, but he brought a photograph of it from the evidence room. There's something else, he said. He handed me a final strip of receipt paper printed from the memory archive. It was not financial. It was a note Helen had entered using the manager memo function 6 months before she died. If Eli finds this, remind him, the diner is not the love. The love is what we built inside it. Choose what lets you live. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down, because the room had become too full of her. I used to think justice would feel hot. I imagined it as anger finding a door. But most days it felt cold and administrative, like signing forms while your chest carried whether no clerk could file. The law moved because evidence told it to move, not because my heart was broken. That was both comforting and insulting. I reopened Pop's Diner for one morning only. No announcement beyond a handwritten sign in the window. Saturday, 7 a.m. to noon. Coffee and pancakes. Pay what you want. Stories accepted. By 6:45, people lined the sidewalk. Former employees came back wearing old aprons. Linda ran the register because she said I could not be trusted to make change while emotional. Pastor Reed poured coffee. Judge Merton sat at the counter and corrected everyone's posture with her eyes. The barber brought a framed photo of Pops from 1978, holding a pancake shaped vaguely like Texas. I stood at the grill. The first pancake burned. Helen would have laughed until she wheezed. The second was better. For 5 hours, the diner sounded alive. Forks clinked, coffee poured, people told stories I had forgotten. Someone remembered Helen giving free pie to a widow every Thursday. Someone remembered Pops throwing out a man who snapped his fingers at a waitress. Someone remembered Caleb at 12, asleep in booth 4, syrup in his hair. I almost asked them to stop. Then I didn't. Memory should not be edited to protect pain. At 11:30, Caleb appeared outside. The room noticed before I did. Conversations softened. Linda looked at me from the register. Caleb stood on the sidewalk in a dark coat, hands empty. He did not try to enter. That mattered. I wiped my hands and went outside. Cold air hit my face. Caleb's eyes were red. I heard you opened, he said. For one morning. I won't come in. No. He nodded like he had expected it. I just wanted to give you this. He held out an envelope. I did not take it immediately. What is it? A list, every account Marissa used that I know about, every password I remember, every person she talked to. Some of it police have, some maybe not. I took the envelope. Why? He looked through the window at the counter, at the people eating pancakes under walls stripped bare. Because Mom told me once that being sorry means making the truth easier to find. I did not remember Helen saying that, but it sounded like her. Caleb swallowed. I know I'm not welcome. You're not. I know. He looked older than his years. Good. Consequences should age the face they belong to. I love you, Dad, he said. The answer rose in me automatically. I had said it to him through fevers, scraped knees, bad report cards, wedding nerves, business mistakes. Love you too. Easy, reflexive, dangerous. I stopped it. I know, I said. Pain crossed his face, but he accepted it. He turned to leave. Caleb. He looked back. Tell the whole truth in court, not the version that saves you most. I will. I'll know if you don't. For the first time in months, his smile was real and terrible. Yeah, he said, I guess you will. He walked away. When I returned inside, Linda touched my sleeve. You okay? No. She nodded. Pancakes are dying. So I went back to the grill. At noon, we locked the door with the old key, not the new lock. Martin had the old lock reinstalled after the injunction because I asked him to. I stood in the empty diner and listened. For one morning, the place had lived again. That was enough to tell me what came next. I sold Pop's Diner 6 months later. Not to Harbor Table, not to developers, not to anyone who used heritage in a sentence while measuring walls for demolition. I sold it to Maria Santos, who had started as a waitress at 17, raised 3 children on tips, and knew the grill's left side ran hotter than the right. She cried when I told her my price. Then she argued it was too low. That was how I knew I had chosen correctly. The sale agreement included 3 conditions. The name Pops stayed on the window. Helen's pie recipe stayed on the menu. The old receipt printer, once returned from evidence, stayed under the counter even if it was never plugged in again. Maria signed without hesitation. Marissa pleaded guilty to multiple charges and received prison time. Not enough if grief were the judge, enough if law was. Evelyn stopped sending offers after her own accounts came under review. Andrew Vale paid a civil settlement and moved somewhere people had not heard him say ignorance under oath. Dana Pike cried at sentencing. Caleb cried too. His sentence was lighter because he cooperated, heavier than he expected because Judge Whitcomb had heard the recording. I attended his hearing. Not for him, not against him. For the record, when Caleb stood to speak, he did not mention Marissa's pressure first. He did not mention debt first. He looked at the judge and said, "I used my father's love as cover because I believed he would forgive anything." That was the first sentence that sounded like truth without decoration. Afterward, he turned toward me. I nodded once. It was not forgiveness, it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that is all a broken bridge can hold. I moved into a smaller house near the river. Helen's quilt hangs over the back of my couch, crooked stitches and all. Linda says the blue squares look like windows. I think the yellow ones look like receipts of light. On Sunday mornings, I visit the diner. Maria pretends not to save me the corner stool. The coffee is stronger now. The pancakes are better than mine were. Young people take photos of the sign because old things become charming after they survive someone trying to erase them. The receipt printer sits beneath the counter with a small brass plaque. Pops rule, machines don't love you. That's why they tell the truth. People ask about it sometimes. Maria tells them it is part of the place's history. She does not give details unless they ask twice. I usually sit quietly and drink coffee while the breakfast rush moves around me. I think about what my father left. Not the building, not the equipment, not even the stubborn little printer that dragged my family's rot into daylight. Pops left a way of seeing. He taught me that love without limits becomes a hiding place for thieves. Helen taught me that tenderness can keep records. Caleb taught me that blood can betray you and still bleed when cut by its own choices. Marissa taught me that evil does not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it brings brochures, contracts, and a sympathy voice. And I learned this. Justice is not getting back what they took. Justice is when the lie no longer gets to live in your name. One morning, a boy at the counter asked Maria why the old printer was still there if the diner had a modern system. Maria looked at me, smiling. I stirred my coffee and answered for her. Because some ghosts know how to keep receipts. The boy laughed because he thought I was joking. I let him. Outside, sunlight touched the window where Pop's name still stood in gold paint. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like a man guarding ruins. I felt like a man who had finally stopped confusing survival with silence. I paid for my coffee in cash. Maria printed the receipt. I folded it once, tucked it in my wallet, and walked home with proof of an ordinary morning. Sometimes, after everything, ordinary is the most satisfying ending there is. People sometimes ask whether I forgave Caleb. They expect either a sermon or a stone. The truth is smaller and less satisfying. Some mornings I pray for him. Some mornings I cannot stand the sound of his name. I have stopped calling that contradiction hypocrisy. I call it being a father after the easy answers have died.